Hello dudes, dudettes, duders, and everyone in between. If your portfolio or show reel isn't getting the response that you're hoping for, it could be because you aren't understanding what producers are actually looking for when they watch your reel. Now, we see a lot of portfolios, and we've watched hundreds of demo reels. We invest a lot of time into the review process, and we do so because there's a question we need to answer before we hire someone. I feel like the conventional wisdom is that a show reel or portfolio should be a collection of your biggest, best, baddest, and boldest work. I mean, technically it should be, but that's because there's no reason to include anything less in your reel. But when we're hiring, we aren't watching show reels to be entertained or to be dazzled. We're trying to get information about you as an artist. What we watch for is something simpler and more useful to our productions, and that is the scale and the kinds of teams that you are already working with. You see, my job as a producer isn't really to make movies, it's to organize teams that make movies. Sometimes I'm on the team as camera operator or director because I know I can deliver to spec and, quite frankly, I can afford myself, but at the end of the day, I'm watching show reels as a producer who has to make decisions regarding the shape of the team I'm building. As I'm watching your reel, I'm trying to triangulate as much information as I can about how you integrate into teams. The North Star is always compatibility, not wow factor. Unfortunately, there are no technical guidelines I can give you on how to tick every box that proves you can integrate into our team. Even if I could, it wouldn't be a useful checklist because you shouldn't be making your show reel only for us. You should be making it for the broader industry so you can get hired for more jobs. That said, I can give you some of the things we see that nudge show reels towards the consider file and what gets your application the dreaded pass status. Now, before we get into it, a quick reminder. You know your footage and ambitions at a deeper level than we ever could. When building your reel, I trust you to trust your gut. If anything that I say resonates with you, use it. If nothing I say resonates, then it's likely you're carving a different lane for yourself than we've carved out over here, and that's okay. Let's get into it. Equipment. Please, don't make the mistake of thinking we judge your show reel by the cost of the equipment you shoot on. With Apple shooting their product launch videos on iPhone and the scrappy indie journalists over at Channel 5 shooting on Reds, gear metrics are increasingly meaningless. Besides, properly finished footage from an A7 and an Arri Alexa look pretty much the same when delivered in 1080 on YouTube. What we're looking for is how your productions tied all that gear together, and in that respect, production cameras are more appealing to us than prosumer SLRs when campaigning for work. It's not because they're more expensive or because we're pixel snobs, it's because they're harder to tie into a pipeline. Simple example. If focus is sharp on an A7, we assume it's because of the autofocus. If focus is sharp on an Alexa, we assume it's because you had at least a dedicated camera op and possibly also someone pulling focus. Production cameras tend toward larger teams, and that makes applicants with a lot of experience shooting on production cameras more interesting to us. Similar assumptions are made regarding audio. If the subject is being mic'd with an off-screen shotgun, we assume there's more going on behind the scenes, not just to build the project out on set, but also to tie everything together in post. At the other end of the spectrum are those monstrous clip-on lavaliers from Rode and the like. I can't tell you how much those mics destroy the credibility of the person on screen and the team that produced the content. I don't want to harp on it too much, but those mics tell us a lot about how you approach production, and frankly, none of it is good for integrating into our teams. It betrays a lack of care regarding how you build your frame and how you build your pipeline. People use those mics because they're easy, not because they're the best tool for the job. Including mics like that on your show reel is basically advertising that you take the easy route instead of the correct one, and it's a great way to let us know that you might not be a good fit for our team. Now, are we going to throw an otherwise great reel in the trash because there's one DJI clip mic in one shot? No, of course not. But to understand why it doesn't do favors with us, you have to understand that the financial spine of our business is corporate videography. And there's no way we're getting called back if we're slapping a big black square onto a CEO's jacket when he's wanting to be taken seriously. But that's just us. If you're trying to get into journalism, showing that you know how to get the audio up and rolling in high-pressure, quick-moving situations might actually curry favor. And this goes back to what I hope you take away from this video, that you build your reel around what the producer wants to see, not what you want to show. Variety. We like a portfolio that shows a broad variety within a narrow lane. That sounds like a contradiction, but let me explain what I mean. If we're hiring a BTS photographer, we only want to see BTS shots in their portfolio, but we want to see as broad a range of BTS as they can demonstrate. For example, if your portfolio is all low-budget horror, that's not a problem as long as the shots look fantastic. But if you have fantastic shots from low-budget horror, mid-budget drama, maybe a big-budget movie or large-scale music festival, perhaps some BTS from a fashion show or a stage play or a ballet, that's even better. Someone who can slide into any environment and perform competently is a more valuable asset than someone who only does one thing, but they do it very well. That best in the biz approach is more lucrative, to be sure, but you have to actually be the best in the biz for it to work. Also, the scale at which we operate simply doesn't have the budget for the best in the biz. We are there to get a job done for our clients and get it done to spec and on budget. We'd love to be having Emmanuel Lubezki light our talking head testimonials from employees at a chemical shipping plant, but that doesn't really fit within the budget or the client's needs. Variety that goes outside of the lane for which you're applying doesn't help your chances of getting a callback, with a caveat, and we'll get into that in a moment. But if we're looking for a BTS photographer and your portfolio includes BTS, portrait, wedding, and product photography, you're actually hurting your chances of getting hired as a BTS photographer. When I'm putting together a team, we're filling seats that were labeled before you submitted your portfolio. We're looking for people to sit in those seats, and the chances of us adding or removing a seat from the project are very slim. Furthermore, it will be the client who is the catalyst for that decision, not the applicants. So, if we're saying a seat is open, you should be telling us how you would fill that specific seat well. If your portfolio or show reel is too broad, that is to say you're talking about how you'd fill other seats that don't exist on the project you're applying for, you are wasting precious frames, which is wasting our time, which is anathema to our production goals. But the caveat. There's always a caveat, isn't there? We back pocket so many portfolios. While the seats for any given production are fixed, we're always churning through new projects, getting new requests in from our clients, and broadening the scope of our teams. If the show reel or portfolio you submit is rockin' and we see a lot of really good portfolios, you better believe that we're going to click around and see what else you've been working on. And if the art is inspiring or beautiful or anything else that clings to hope which springs eternal in the human breast, we bookmark that portfolio immediately. And when the right job comes along, we get in touch with the applicant and breathe a long-awaited sigh of relief that we finally get to collaborate. Travel. Please do not worry too much about this one. Lack of travel is not a ding against you. We aren't throwing away otherwise solid portfolios because you haven't sailed the 7 seas. Likewise, shots of the Shibuya Scramble aren't going to get you hired just because it's the Shibuya Scramble. Travel has to make sense within the context of your reel, and the shots have to match the quality of everything else that you've shown us. That said, travel does tell us a lot about you as an applicant. Productions that involve travel tend to also involve larger teams. It's a lot easier to shoot in your backyard than it is to shoot in another country, and executing projects of greater complexity requires more staff to keep everything running smoothly. If you're part of such teams, we assume the best about that. Furthermore, travel is rough. It's rough on the body, and it's rough on equipment. If you can bounce back from the extra wear and tear travel puts on you and your gear and still deliver to spec, we assume the best about that. Also, travel shows us that you can integrate into foreign environments. A huge factor we consider when hiring is compatibility. Like I said, it's the North Star. Are you going to be able to adapt to our team? If you can adapt to a culture where you don't speak or read the language, we assume the best about that. Travel in your reel or portfolio also tells us that other producers were ready to invest in you. Travel isn't cheap, and if other productions believe that you are not only worth your day rate, but also the cost of airfare, meals, hotels, and a per diem, we're going to assume the best about that. Finally, and least importantly, but also kinda most importantly, Folks who travel tend to have better stories. I'm not saying that they're better storytellers, I'm saying that they tend to have better stories. That factor is least important when it comes to filling the empty seat, but I'm still a human being. My favorite part of the day is lunch, when we sit down and actually talk to each other as human people. If you want to talk about camera specs and recent announcements from Apple over lunch, I will be polite and that's how the conversation will go. If I had my druthers though, I'd rather be sitting across the table from someone who can spin a yarn I haven't heard before. Spinning a yarn is a lot easier to do if you've gone out into the world and pulled a few threads. Do you need more sewing-related metaphors and puns? Okay, let's do it. Pulling threads gives you the ability to weave a tapestry that can hit like a bolt of inspiration and keep our heads bobbing. It'll make your life brighter than a monitor of a million nits, and that's exactly what we need, all. Shall I continue? Travel will make your show reel complete, or so it seems. So stop hemming about these remnant notions, darn it, and pin down a good show reel. Okay, we need to cut that string of nonsense right now. As you review your show reel, ask yourself what it communicates to the producers who are going to end up watching it. Does it show that you can work on a team? Does it show that you have creative ideas and you know how to manifest them with the support of others? And if you don't have footage that communicates that, how can you fix it? That is exactly the topic we'll be discussing next week. So if you found this useful, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications. Of course, if you have a show reel that you want us to review, just send it our way. We love watching show reels, and if I'm being completely honest, we always want to give feedback on every reel and portfolio that comes across our desk, but we don't because it isn't solicited. That said, I do run a YouTube channel. If you want to flatter me, ask my opinion. As always, thank you for watching. Now please turn off YouTube and go chop together the greatest show reel the world has ever seen.